Evan moved through the silent ruins of the frontier moon, his boots sinking into the gray dust that covered everything like a forgotten blanket. He was a human medic, sent here only to pick up any survivors or collect damaged supplies. But the place felt far too empty, far too cold. The wind whistled through broken metal beams, making a soft crying sound that almost felt alive. Evan stopped walking when he heard a faint pulse signal, a slow rhythmic beat, like a heartbeat trapped inside. A dying machine. He looked around, confused, because no human signal sounded like that. Still, something in the sound felt desperate, like someone calling for help. He followed the strange pulse toward a half-collapsed research dome. Its glass cracked, its wires hanging like ribs from a broken animal. Evan stepped inside carefully, shining his light across dusty consoles and shattered monitors. The pulse beat again, louder this time, echoing through the dome and pulling him deeper inside. Then he heard a small sound, soft and shaky, like someone. Trying not to cry, he moved slowly, his heart pounding, and pushed aside a fallen metal sheet. Behind it, in the shadows, sat a small alien girl. Her knees pulled to her chest, her arms wrapped around them tightly. Her skin glowed faint blue under the dust, her hair floating like soft threads of light. Evan froze, shocked, because he had never seen an alien child this close. She stared at him with wide, trembling eyes, but she did not run. Instead, she made a sound, a short melody of clicks, notes, and soft hums, nothing close to human language. Her voice shook, and she lowered her head. As if expecting him to hurt her, Evan slowly lifted both hands to show he meant no harm. "It's okay, I'm not here to hurt you," he said gently, even though he knew she could not understand the words. But tone was something universal. Her glowing eyes flickered, shifting between colors like she was trying to decide if she could trust him. He took a step closer, and she flinched, pressing herself against the broken console behind her. He stopped immediately, not wanting to scare her more. Then he noticed something on her wrist, a small metal band with a royal crest carved into it. Evan's breath caught. That symbol belonged to one of the most powerful alien empires in the galaxy. This girl was not just a child, she was royalty. Suddenly, the dome shook, dust falling from above as engines thundered outside. Evan ducked instinctively while the girl covered her ears and whimpered in fear. A red scanner light swept across the dome walls, searching, hunting. Evan looked at the girl, and she looked back, her eyes glowing bright with terror. He understood. Instantly, someone dangerous was looking for her, someone she desperately did not want to find her. She reached out suddenly and grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. She shook her head fast, making anxious clicking sounds, trying to warn him. Her grip trembled, her whole body shaking. Evan knelt beside her and gently placed a hand over hers. "It's okay, I'm here," he whispered, hoping his voice would calm her. Her breathing slowed a little, but her eyes stayed wide, watching the roof like she expected it to break open at any moment. A shadow passed over the cracked dome window. Evan's heart jumped. Whoever was outside was not a rescue team, and if they found her, something terrible would happen. Even he could feel that. He looked at the girl again, noticing how thin she was, how weak her breathing sounded. She must have been hiding here for days, maybe longer. Her small hands were shaking from hunger, fear, and exhaustion. Evan made a silent decision, one that changed everything. He reached forward slowly and offered his hand. "Come with me," he whispered. Even if she did not know the words, she stared at his hand like she had never seen such a gesture before. Then, with trembling fingers, she placed her small glowing hand in his. The ruins shook again as another ship landed outside. This time, heavy footsteps echoed across the metal ground. The hunters had arrived. Evan lifted the girl into his arms, and she held onto him tightly, her tiny fingers gripping his jacket with all her strength. Her eyes glowed in fear, but also with something new, hope. Evan looked toward the broken doorway, knowing he had seconds before they were found. He whispered softly, "I've got you." and the girl buried her face in his chest as he ran into the darkness of the ruins, carrying a princess who could not speak a single human word, but her silence said more than any language ever could. Even ran through the ruins with the alien girl in his arms, his breath sharp and heavy as the cold air cut against his lungs. Behind him, the hunter's ship released a deep metallic roar, sending vibrations through the ground like a warning. The girl tightened her grip on his jacket, her glowing fingers trembling against the fabric. She lifted her head for a moment, her eyes shifting between colors and fast, frightened patterns. She made soft clicking sounds, urgent ones, as if trying to tell him which way to go, but the sounds were impossible for him to understand, so he followed his instincts and kept moving deeper into the broken city. A harsh red scan beam swept across the ruins, crawling along the broken walls like a hungry creature searching for prey. Evan ducked behind a collapsed pillar just in time, shielding the girl behind his body. She pressed her forehead against his arm, shaking. For a moment, Evan realized this was the first time she had let herself lean on someone. He whispered gently, "I won't let them take you," hoping she could feel the promise in his voice. The girl touched her wrist, tapping the metal crest with 2 fingers. Then she pointed toward the horizon where a tall, cracked structure stood like a skeleton. She clicked again, this time slower, more focused. Evan understood she wanted him to go there. He nodded and carried her in that direction, moving quietly along the rubble. But the hunters were faster than he expected. A shadow dropped from above. A tall alien figure in dark armor landed on a broken vehicle. Scanning the area with bright yellow eyes, Evan froze behind a wall, barely daring to breathe. He could feel the girl's small heart beating rapidly against his chest. The hunter sniffed the air, as if smelling their presence. Evan held the girl tighter, trying to keep her calm. The hunter spoke into a device, his rough voice echoing through the ruins. "Target is nearby. The princess is injured. Capture her alive." Evan felt the girl shiver violently. Her hand curled into a fist, and suddenly glowing symbols started to crawl up her arm. Evan stared in shock, not sure what was happening. But before he could say anything, the symbols pulsed bright like a beating star. Then they burst forward in a wave of blue energy. The blast was powerful but silent. It knocked dust off the walls and sent a ripple through the ground. But the hunter did not see it. He only paused. Confused, Evan saw something else, though. The girl's body slumped weakly in his arms, her glow dimming. The energy she used had drained her badly. He whispered, "Hey, stay with me." As he brushed dust from her face, she blinked slowly. Lifting her hand to touch his cheek, she hummed a soft note, sad, apologetic. Evan finally understood she didn't want to hurt him with that power. She only wanted to warn the hunters away, but the power was too much for her small body to handle. He hurried toward the cracked structure she had pointed at earlier. It was an old medical outpost built during the moon's first colonization. Inside, broken beds and shattered machines filled the dark rooms. Evan laid the girl on a table and checked her pulse. It was weak, unsteady, flickering like a fading light. He took out his medical kit and tried scanning her, but his human tools struggled to read her biology. She watched him with tired eyes, trying to speak, but only soft humming escaped. She lifted her hand weakly and pointed to a small metallic node on her rib area. Evan understood she wanted him to look there. He scanned the spot and saw a strange organic device fused to her bones. It pulsed irregularly, like it was failing. This was not normal technology. This was royal biotech, alive and connected to her body. "If this fails, you fail too," Evan whispered, realizing the danger. He did what he could, stabilizing the device with makeshift tools and gentle pressure. The girl winced but did not resist. Her hand reached for his sleeve, gripping it softly as she tried to trust him completely. A sudden explosion outside shook the entire outpost. The hunters had found their trail. Dust rained from the ceiling as heavy footsteps approached the doorway. Evan grabbed the girl, who tried to stand but nearly collapsed. He held her close, and she buried her face against his shoulder again. The sound of metal claws scraping the ground grew louder. The hunters were here. They would tear the outpost apart to find her. Evan tightened his hold on the princess as he looked for an escape. But there was only one path left, the narrow tunnel under the outpost that led into the frozen canyons. He whispered, "We have to go," and the girl nodded weakly, even though she could not speak human words. Her eyes said everything. She trusted him. She feared the hunters, and she knew that escaping together was their only hope. With the hunters closing in, Evan carried her into the darkness of the tunnel, unaware that the cold outside could kill her far faster than any enemy. The tunnel under the outpost was narrow and cold, with icy air cutting through Evan's clothes like sharp needles. He held the alien princess close, trying to keep her warm as he moved deeper into the darkness. Her glowing skin dimmed with every step, like a lantern slowly losing its flame. She pressed her forehead weakly against his chest, her body shivering from cold and exhaustion. Evan knew she would not last long in this freezing place, but they had no choice. Behind them, the hunter's footsteps echoed down the metal passage. Steady and merciless, Evan pushed forward, stumbling over broken pipes and loose stones. The tunnel finally opened into a wide frozen canyon, its walls high and covered with sheets of ice. Wind screamed between the rocks, sending white dust flying in violent spirals. The princess whimpered softly. Burying her face deeper into his jacket, Evan could feel her skin turning colder, too cold for any living body. He looked around desperately for shelter and spotted a narrow cave entrance a short distance away. Without wasting a second, he ran toward it, feeling the icy wind bite into his skin. Inside the cave, the air was still freezing, but at least the wind could not reach them. Evan carefully set the girl down on a flat stone surface, her body trembling with each breath. He took off his thermal jacket and wrapped it around her small frame. The sudden warmth made her let out a weak sigh, her eyes flickering open just a little. Evan sat beside her, gently rubbing her arms to help her body gain heat again. "You're okay," he whispered, even if she did not know the words, but she lifted one small hand and touched his chest in return, a gesture she had repeated twice before, one of trust, one of gratitude. Her glowing symbols slowly returned, swirling faintly beneath her skin. She reached out and drew something in. The frost-covered ground, a circle with stars around it. Evan watched closely as she added a small symbol inside the circle, a royal crest. Then she drew a jagged shape outside the circle, followed by a line cutting through it. It took him a moment to understand. She was showing him her story. He pointed at the outer jagged shape. "Danger," he guessed, and her eyes widened as she nodded quickly. Then she drew a small figure, alone. Surrounded by broken lines, she pointed to herself. Evan's heart ached as he realized she had been abandoned by her own people. Not lost, not separated, abandoned. She pressed her hand to her chest, then made a soft, painful note, a sound that carried sadness even without language. Evan moved closer and took her cold hand gently. "No one should leave you behind," he whispered. Her eyes shimmered with soft blue light, her breathing easing slightly. She touched his hand again, and for the first time, she did not pull away quickly. Instead, she held on to him as if he were her only anchor in this terrifying world. The cave suddenly trembled as a loud explosion echoed from outside. The hunters were searching the canyon, firing at every possible hiding spot. Evan instinctively shielded the princess, pulling her into his arms. Her body reacted to the fear. Glowing lines shot across her skin like lightning. But this time the symbols did not explode. They pulsed gently, like a heartbeat trying to connect with something. Evan felt a strange warmth where her skin touched his. Images flickered in his mind. Stars, a golden palace, a throne, and her standing alone before angry figures. It was not a full memory, only small pieces, but he understood one thing clearly. She had been targeted by someone within her own empire. Someone who wanted her gone. Someone powerful. The princess pulled away slightly, breathing fast as if sharing the memory exhausted her. Evan held her shoulders. "You're safe with me," he said softly. She looked up, her glowing eyes full of fear and something new, trust deeper than before. A sharp beeping noise suddenly echoed through the cave. Evan turned and saw his handheld scanner picking up a strong heat signature approaching fast. The hunters had found their trail. The princess grabbed his arm, her glowing symbols brightening urgently. She pointed toward the back of the cave where a narrow passage wound upward into the rocks. Her message was clear. They had to move now. Evan lifted her again, her small hands wrapping weakly around his neck. She hummed softly, the sound trembling but full of determination. Together, they moved toward the hidden passage as the hunter's shadow stretched across the canyon entrance. The princess pressed her head against his shoulder once more, her breath warming the fabric of his jacket. For the first time, Evan felt something. Beyond fear or duty, he felt a bond forming, fragile but strong. A bond that connected two worlds that had never understood each other. A bond that might save them, or destroy everything. Evan climbed the narrow rocky passage with the princess held tightly in his arms. His legs burning from the steep climb, the cave shook with every distant blast as the hunters searched the canyon, tearing apart anything that could hide them. Cold air rushed through the cracks in the cave. But the tight passage kept the worst of the wind away. The princess curled closer to him, her body shaking from exhaustion and fear. Her glowing marks flickered weakly, embers struggling to stay alive. Evan whispered to her softly, hoping. His voice alone could keep her calm. At last, the passage opened into a flat ledge high above the canyon. From there, the entire frozen valley stretched in every direction. Glowing faintly under the pale moonlight, broken towers, collapsed outposts, and crashed vehicles lay scattered like forgotten bones. The princess looked out at the ruins with a sadness he could feel even without words. This place had been her refuge, but also her prison. Now it was only a battlefield. Evan spotted an old communication tower on a distant hill. Its top cracked, but its base still standing. "If I can send a signal, maybe someone can help us," he muttered, even though he wasn't sure anyone friendly would hear. The princess followed his gaze, her eyes widening as if she recognized the tower. She touched Evan's chest twice, then pointed toward the tower. A simple gesture, but Evan understood. She wanted him to go there. She believed help might be possible. They made their way down the rocky path, moving slowly so Evan wouldn't slip with her in his arms. Halfway down, she tugged lightly at his sleeve and made a soft hum. Her glowing symbols formed a small circle beneath her skin, bright but gentle. A warm pulse went through Evan's chest, easing his aching limbs. She was healing him again with her royal biotech, but using her power drained her, and her glow dimmed as soon as she finished. Evan gently touched her hand. "Don't push yourself too much," he whispered. She blinked slowly, as if trying to tell him she understood. When they reached the valley floor, the silence shattered. A hunter ship zoomed overhead, its engines screaming as it scanned the snow-covered ground. Evan ducked behind a broken wall and held the princess close. The ship hovered, its lights cutting through the darkness like sharp blades. The princess trembled fiercely, her hands clinging to Evan's jacket. Her glowing symbols spasmed across her skin in chaotic patterns. Evan whispered calming words, trying to bring her back to herself, but something was changing. Her glow suddenly grew brighter, not dimmer, as if reacting to the danger. Her body stiffened in Evan's arms, her eyes glowing pure white for a breathless moment. Then, without warning, a burst of energy exploded from her skin. A silent flash of blinding blue light shot upward, cutting through the sky like a star being born. The hunter ship spun violently, alarms blaring, and veered off course, crashing into the frozen ground with a fiery explosion. Evan shielded the girl from falling debris, but she had already collapsed in his arms. Her glow faded to almost nothing, her breathing thin and shaky. "Hey, stay with me," Evan murmured, panic rising inside him. She blinked slowly, her eyelids heavy. Her hand lifted weakly and touched his cheek. A faint, exhausted hum escaped her throat. Evan understood. She hadn't meant to release that energy. It was instinct, a protective reaction she couldn't control. He carried her the rest of the way to the communication tower as fast as he could. The base of the tower was cracked and covered in frost, but the inner chamber still hummed faintly with power. Evan laid the princess on a metal platform, brushing dust from her glowing hair. Then he rushed to the console, trying desperately to activate the old transmitter. The screen flickered weakly, showing ancient alien symbols he couldn't read. "I need this to work," he whispered, hitting buttons at random. The princess sat up slowly, her body trembling. She touched the console with both hands, her symbols glowing a soft blue. The ancient system responded instantly, lighting up as if recognizing her royal signature. Evan stared in awe. She was more than royalty. She was a direct heir, a living key that controlled their empire's technology. But activating the tower had consequences. Outside, the ground shook as massive engines roared across the sky. Evan ran to the doorway and looked up. His heart nearly stopped. A fleet of ships descended from the clouds. Not hunters this time, but her own empire's war vessels, heavy and powerful. The princess stood behind him, swaying on weak legs as she looked at the descending fleet. Her eyes glowed with fear rather than hope. Evan realized something terrible. Her own people were not here to rescue her. They were here to erase witnesses, and she knew it. She grabbed Ivan's hand tightly, her body shaking. Her eyes pleaded with him, glowing with fear and desperate trust. Without speaking a word, she asked him the one question only he could answer. Would he stand with her against her own empire, or let them take her away forever? Asterisk. The roar of the alien war fleet filled the sky as massive shadows passed over the frozen land. Evan stepped back into the tower, pulling the princess behind him. Her small hand gripped his tightly, shaking with fear. Her own people, her own royal empire, had arrived, but the terror in her glowing eyes told Evan everything he needed to know. They weren't here to rescue her. They were here to remove her, silence her, erase any proof she had survived. The tower trembled as the first ship landed nearby, sending dust and wind crashing against the metal walls. Evan lifted the princess into his arms again, feeling the weakness in her small frame. Her breath came in light, shivering pulses, her glow barely visible under her skin. But when she looked at him, there was something new, not just fear, but determination. She pointed toward the old maintenance tunnel beneath the tower, a narrow path leading deep into the underground ruins. He nodded, not wasting a second. They rushed into the tunnel just as metallic steps echoed outside. Armored soldiers with glowing spears spread out around the tower, scanning the area. The princess held onto Evan's neck, her cymbals flickering faintly. She hummed softly, the sound slow but steady, like she was trying to comfort him even though she was the one in danger. Evan whispered back, "I'm not letting them take you." Her eyes softened, glowing a gentle silver in the darkness. The tunnel descended into an old underground system filled with broken machines and flickering lights. The air was warmer here, almost alive with leftover alien energy. Evan set the princess down for a moment so he could move debris blocking the passage. She tried to help, using her small hands to push a loose panel, but her strength faded and she collapsed to her knees. Evan rushed to her side, lifting her again. "You don't have to do everything," he whispered. Her eyes shimmered, as if the words meant more to her than he understood. Behind them, the sound of metal scraping echoed. The soldiers had found the tunnel entrance. Their voices thundered through the passage, harsh and commanding. Evan tightened his grip around the princess and ran deeper into the maze of old metal corridors. The princess pointed ahead, showing him where the paths connected. She had lived here long enough to memorize every corner. Her gestures saved them again and again as they turned just before soldiers appeared. At last, they reached a massive underground chamber filled with old alien machines stacked like rusted giants. The room glowed with faint blue light from broken energy cores scattered on the ground. The princess lifted her head and stared at one of the cores, her eyes widening. She reached out and touched the side of Evan's face, then pointed toward the glowing structures. Evan understood. They could hide among the machines. He carried her through the maze of metal and placed her in a sheltered spot between two large coils. But before he could rest, the princess tugged his sleeve weakly and made a small clicking sound. Her symbol suddenly lit brighter. She placed her hand on his chest, then on her own. A simple, beautiful gesture. She saw him as someone important. Someone safe, someone who chose her. Evan felt a strange warmth in his chest. Not from her power, but from the bond growing between them. The moment shattered when a beam of red light cut across the chamber. The soldiers had arrived. Their leader stepped forward, tall, armored, and wearing a crest much like the princess's but darker, colder. He spoke in a deep, commanding voice that echoed through the ruins. "Return the air, human. This does not concern your species." The princess clung to Evan, shaking violently. Evan stepped in front of her, shielding her with his body. He didn't know what he was doing, only that he couldn't let them take her. He shouted back. "She doesn't want to go with you," the leader laughed. A dark, cruel sound. "She has no choice." And then everything changed. The princess stepped out from behind Evan, her legs trembling but her eyes glowing bright. She lifted her hands in front of her chest, her symbol spinning rapidly across her skin. Her royal power awakened again, but this time she controlled it. A shimmering blue shield formed around her and Evan, bright and humming with ancient energy. The soldiers attacked, but their weapons bounced off the shield like sparks against water. The princess strained, her body shaking as she kept the barrier up. Evan placed his hands on her shoulders, whispering, "You're not alone, I'm here." Her glow intensified, fed by the trust between them. But the effort was too much. Her knees buckled and the shield flickered dangerously. Evan grabbed her before she fell, holding her close as the barrier began to collapse. The chamber ceiling started to break apart from the energy clash. Stone and metal rained down, creating chaos as soldiers stumbled back. Evan lifted the princess and ran toward a side passage. Her faint humming against his chest told him she was still conscious. Barely the cavern shook around them, dust falling like snow. They escaped into the narrow corridor just as the shield burst and the chamber collapsed, the way behind them sealed with rubble. Blocking the soldiers, for now, Evan pressed the trembling princess to his chest, feeling her heartbeat slow and weak. He whispered, "I've got you. I won't let them take you." And even though she could not speak his language, her eyes answered with a soft, fading glow that said she believed him completely. Evan moved through the narrow underground corridor, carrying the princess in his arms, his breathing heavy and his body shaking from exhaustion. Dust drifted from the ceiling as the crashed chamber behind them settled into silence. The princess pressed weakly against him, her glowing marks barely visible now, their light fading like a dying ember. Her fingers curled lightly against his jacket as if holding onto him was the only thing keeping her awake. Evan whispered softly, "Stay with me, we're almost safe," even though he wasn't sure where safety existed anymore. The hallway widened into a circular room filled with old alien devices, half broken and covered in frost. Strange symbols glowed faintly on the walls, forming spirals that flickered when the princess lifted her eyes toward them. It was as if the ruins themselves recognized her presence. Evan set her down carefully on a smooth metal slab and checked her pulse. It was shallow, unsteady, and frighteningly slow. He searched the room desperately, looking for anything useful in the corner. He found a compact device, a translator core, cracked but still functional. Alien symbols pulsed across its surface, glowing in patterns similar to the ones on her skin. Evan rushed back to her, lifting her hand gently and placing it on the device. For a moment nothing happened. Then her glowing marks brightened slightly, responding to the machine. Lines of light traveled from her fingertips into the device. Activating it with a soft hum, the machine projected faint images into the air symbols. Shapes, colors. Evan watched as the princess weakly lifted her other hand and traced shapes. In the air, the device translated her glowing gestures into clearer symbols. Slowly, a message formed. A message she had been trying to tell him from the beginning. The first image showed a tall throne room filled with shadows. A young version of the princess stood beside a glowing structure, her eyes full of innocence. Then the shadows behind her twisted, forming the shape of a tall figure with a dark crest, the same crest Evan saw on the hunter leader. The image shifted again, showing the girl being taken away, hidden inside a transport ship, her small hands pressed against the window as she was abandoned on the frontier moon. Her humming voice trembled as she watched her own memories. Evan felt his heart tighten painfully. She was not a runaway. She was not lost. She had been discarded, left behind to die by someone who feared her rightful place on the throne. The translator projected another image, Evan holding her in the ruins, shielding her from danger. Her glowing symbols formed a soft circle around his figure. The device translated the meaning into simple alien runes. Evan read the rough interpretation on the small display. Safe one. He looked at her, stunned. She had given him a name, a title of trust in her culture. Something sacred and only given to someone she believed would protect her life. The princess lifted her hand weakly toward him again, tracing another symbol. This one glowed brighter than the rest, filling the room with soft light. The translator struggled before displaying the new message. A voice from a silent world will guard the star-born heir. A prophecy about her, about him. Evan swallowed hard, unable to speak. He never believed in destiny, yet here he was, part of one without even knowing it. Before he could respond, the room shook violently. A loud metallic boom rang from above. The Empire's soldiers had found another way into the underground system. Dust rained from the ceiling as footsteps echoed closer and closer. The princess panicked, her glowing marks flickering rapidly. She struggled to sit, her body shaking from the effort. Evan quickly helped her up, but she pushed weakly against him, pointing toward the far tunnel. She wanted him to run. She wanted him to leave her so he could survive. But Evan shook his head and pulled her close. "I'm not leaving you," he whispered firmly. Her eyes widened, shimmering with emotion. For the first time, he saw tears forming glowing droplets that reflected the room's faint light. The footsteps grew louder. Voices barked commands in alien language. The princess pressed her crest to Evan's chest, her glowing marks flaring bright despite her weakness. Then she turned toward the entrance, lifting one trembling hand. The royal crest on her wrist projected a blinding seal of blue light across the tunnel, blocking the soldiers' path. But the seal drained her completely. Her legs gave out, and she collapsed into Evan's arms again. The translators flickered one last time, displaying a final message in broken symbols. "Protect. You safe. Mine." Evan held her tightly, feeling her heartbeat weakening against his chest. He whispered back, "I'm here. I'm not letting anyone take you." Outside, the Empire's ships repositioned, preparing for a full takeover of the ruins. Inside the room, the princess lay against him, trusting him with the last of her strength. He didn't know how he would protect her now. He only knew one truth. He would not let her face this fate alone, not anymore. The underground chamber shook again as the Empire's soldiers forced their way deeper into the ruins. Evan held the princess close, feeling her shallow breaths against his chest. Her glowing marks dimmed to the softest flicker, like the last light of a fading star. He gently brushed her hair back, whispering, "Stay with me." She opened her eyes just enough to look at him, her gaze soft and full of trust, even without words. She spoke to him. She believed he would protect her. She believed he would not leave her, but the enemy was closing in. Heavy footsteps echoed through the tunnels, metal scraping against stone, weapons humming with deadly energy. Evan stood, lifting the princess in his arms, and moved toward the far passage she had pointed to earlier. The ceiling cracked above them. Sending dust raining from the archway, the princess weakly raised her hand and pressed her fingertips to his neck. A soft glow passed into him, warming his exhausted body. She was giving him her last energy so he could keep going. Evan shook his head, whispering, "No, save your strength." But she only touched his cheek again, her eyes shimmering. With quiet love and gratitude, they reached the end of the passage, which opened into a massive chamber carved from ancient stone. Tall pillars surrounded a circular platform in the center, etched with alien symbols that glowed faintly as they entered. The princess lifted her head. Recognizing the place instantly, she made a small humming sound, filled with meaning. This was a sanctuary. A place used only by royal bloodlines. A place of judgment, unity, and truth. Evan placed her gently on the platform as she extended one trembling hand toward its center. The carvings lit up beneath her palm, blue light spreading across the entire chamber like living water. Her glowing marks brightened just enough to respond. A hidden mechanism activated, opening a vertical energy field on the far wall. Evan stepped back in awe as three figures appeared within the light. High-ranking royal guardians, not traitors, but protectors sworn to the Empire's true heir. The guardians stepped forward slowly, respectful and silent, as they approached the princess. One knelt before her, touching the ground with his hands. Evan expected relief on the princess's face, but instead, her eyes filled with fear. She hid behind Evan's leg, gripping him tightly. The guardian spoke in a gentle, calm tone, but she only shook her head weakly. Evan realized the truth. She no longer trusted her own people, not after being abandoned, not after being hunted. Evan stepped forward, placing a protective arm around her. "She's scared," he said, knowing they couldn't understand the words, but hoping they would understand his intent. The guardians looked at him with a mixture of shock and respect. No human had ever stood beside a royal heir in such a way. The eldest guardian placed a hand over his heart, bowing deeply to them both. Then he activated a projection from his wrist, showing the traitor's crest, the same one worn by the hunter leader. Evan understood immediately. The traitor had deceived the Empire, claiming the princess was dead. The guardians had been searching for truth. They were here because of the signal she released. They were not her enemies. They were the ones still loyal to her. The princess looked from Evan to the guardians, her eyes trembling with confusion. Evan knelt beside her, lifting her chin gently with his fingers. "It's okay," he whispered softly. "You're safe, I promise." She stared at him for a long moment, then slowly turned to the guardians. Her glowing marks brightened faintly, forming the crest of the royal family across her skin. The guardians immediately dropped to both knees, honoring their true heir. One of them extended a small device toward her, a royal command seal, a sign of unity, protection, and rightful power. The princess reached out with shaking hands and touched the device. Her energy flowed into it, lighting the chamber with a brilliant blue glow. The seal responded to her, acknowledging her as the rightful ruler. The traitor's lies shattered in that single moment. But the danger was not over. The ground shook as traitor soldiers burst into the chamber entrance, firing immediately. Evan jumped in front of the princess, shielding her with his body. The guardians rushed forward, blocking the blasts with their shields. The princess's glowing marks blazed suddenly with new strength she didn't know she still had. Her power rose like a storm, swirling around the chamber in waves of shimmering light. Evan felt her small hand grab his, her fingers intertwined with his. She looked up at him, eyes glowing bright gold for the first time. Her voice finally formed not words but a soft, pure tone that vibrated with ancient royal power. The light surged outward, engulfing the traitor soldiers and disarming them instantly. The guardians stood firm, honored witnesses to her awakening. Evan shielded her even as the chamber glowed brighter. When the light faded, silence filled the air. The soldiers were defeated, the traitor's command broken, and the princess, though exhausted, leaned her head against Evan's shoulder with peaceful trust. The guardians approached and bowed deeply. One spoke softly, offering Evan a position no human had ever been offered, a guardian of the royal heir, a protector of her life. A bridge between two worlds. Evan looked at the princess. Her small hand reached for his again. Her glowing eyes whispered the truth she could not speak. He was her family now, her safety, her chosen protector. Evan held her hand and nodded. "I'm staying," he whispered, and for the first time, the princess understood a human word perfectly. Her voice, small but clear, hummed one gentle sound. "Home."